The twin moons of Zephyria cast an ethereal glow across the crystalline landscape as Marcus Thorn carved another portion from the massive carcass before him. Steam rose from the perfectly cooked meat, the aroma mixing with the planet's naturally sweet atmosphere. He couldn't help but grin as he took another bite. 3 months stranded on this world, and he'd finally managed to take down one of the legendary void serpents. The creature had been magnificent in life, nearly 30 feet of obsidian scales and bioluminescent markings that pulsed with deadly energy. Its venom could dissolve titanium alloy, and its psychic scream had been known to drive lesser beings insane. Yet here it was, slowly roasting over his carefully constructed fire pit, seasoned with herbs he'd foraged from the local flora. Marcus's weathered hands showed the scars of his time on Zephyria. His once pristine expedition suit was now patched and modified for survival, reinforced with scales from smaller predators he'd defeated. His dark hair had grown longer, tied back with strips of serpent hide, and his green eyes held a confidence that came from knowing he could survive anything this world threw at him. The attack had come at dawn, just as he'd been checking his perimeter sensors. The void serpent had been hunting him for days, its intelligence far beyond what the briefings had suggested. When it finally struck, Marcus had been ready. His plasma rifle had damaged it, but the killing blow had come from his grandfather's hunting knife, a relic from old Earth that had never failed him. As he savored another bite of the surprisingly tender meat, movement at the edge of his camp caught his attention. A figure emerged from behind one of the towering crystal formations, moving with a grace that seemed to defy gravity. Marcus's breath caught as the being stepped into the firelight. She was unlike anything he'd encountered in his years of xenobiological research. Her skin held a faint opalescent quality, shifting between silver and pale blue in the moonlight. Long flowing hair that seemed to contain actual starlight framed delicate features that were both alien and hauntingly beautiful. Her form was humanoid but ethereal, as if she were partially made of the same light that danced across Zephoria's night sky. The being wore form-fitting armor that looked grown rather than manufactured, its surface rippling with the same bioluminescent patterns Marcus had seen on the void serpent. Most striking were her eyes, large, luminous, and currently wide with what appeared to be shock and disbelief. "By the ancient light," she whispered, her voice carrying a musical quality that made Marcus's universal translator work overtime to convert her meaning. What are you doing?" Marcus looked down at the chunk of meat in his hand, then back at the stunning alien. He'd read about the Luminar in the expedition files, an advanced species that viewed the void serpents as semi-divine beings, apex predators that represented the pinnacle of evolution on their world. He supposed his current activity might be somewhat shocking to them. "Having dinner," he replied simply, gesturing toward the roasting carcass with his free hand. "Would you care to join me? There's plenty to go around." The Luminar female took a hesitant step closer, her movements fluid and hypnotic. You killed a void serpent? Alone?" "Well, it tried to kill me first," Marcus said with a shrug, taking another bite. "Seemed only fair to return the favor. I'm Marcus Thorn, by the way, human xenobiologist, currently enjoying an extended stay on your lovely world. Naya Christhaven," she replied automatically, then seemed to remember herself. "I'm a scout for the Northern Territories. I was investigating the psychic disturbance we detected yesterday. The ... the death scream of an apex predator." Marcus nodded toward the serpent's head, which he'd mounted as a trophy near his shelter. "That would be this fellow. Put up quite a fight, actually. Nearly took my head off with its tail before I managed to get close enough with my blade." Naya's luminous eyes widened further. "You fought it in close combat? That's impossible. Our greatest warriors hunt in groups of 12, and even then, success is rare. Different worlds, different rules, I suppose," Marcus said, patting the ground beside him invitingly. On Earth, that's my home world, we've got creatures that make your void serpents look like pets. Ever hear of a crocodile? Or better yet, a honey badger? Despite her obvious shock, Naya found herself drawn to this strange human. There was something magnetic about his casual confidence, the way he treated the unthinkable as merely another day's work. She settled beside him, careful to maintain some distance, though she found his proximity oddly comforting rather than threatening. "How is this possible?" she asked, watching as Marcus prepared another portion of meat, this time seasoning it with aromatic compounds he'd extracted from local plants. The void serpents are perfect killers. They've existed unchanged for millennia because nothing could challenge them. Marcus handed her the prepared meat on a flat piece of crystal he'd fashioned into a makeshift plate. "Nothing on Zephyria, maybe? But evolution is about adaptation, and humans are very good at adapting. We've been apex predators on Earth for thousands of years, and we didn't get there by respecting the food chain. We got there by redefining it." Naya stared at the offered food, her cultural conditioning warring with an unexpected curiosity. The aroma was incredible, unlike anything she'd ever encountered. Her people subsisted on energy-rich fruits and processed nutrients, but this smelled like pure vitality. "I shouldn't," she whispered, but her eyes remained fixed on the meat. "Why not?" Marcus asked gently. "It's already dead. Honoring its sacrifice by not letting it go to waste seems more respectful than leaving it to rot." The logic was undeniable, even if it challenged everything Naya had been taught. Slowly, hesitantly, she took a small bite. The flavor exploded across her palate, rich, complex, with undertones she couldn't identify. It was like tasting starlight itself. "This is ... double quotes," she began, then took another bite. "How is it so good?" Marcus grinned, pleased by her reaction. "Turns out your apex predators taste as good as they fight. There's something to be said for a creature that's spent its entire evolution becoming the perfect hunter makes for perfect eating, too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sharing the meal as Zephyria's moons traced their path across the star-filled sky. Naya found herself studying Marcus covertly, fascinated by the scars that marked his hands and arms, the easy way he moved despite the obvious dangers he'd faced. There was a wildness to him, but also a gentleness in how he spoke to her, how he'd shared his kill without hesitation. "Your people," she said eventually, "they're all like you?" Marcus laughed, the sound warm and rich in the crystal-clear night air. "Not all. I'm what you might call a specialist. Most humans are content with safer pursuits, but some of us are drawn to the unknown, the dangerous. We call it the frontier spirit. And you came here alone?" "My ship had some technical difficulties," Marcus said diplomatically. In truth, his vessel had been sabotaged by a rival research team, but Naya didn't need to know that. "I've been making the best of it while I work on repairs." Naya's expression softened with what looked like sympathy. "You must be lonely." Marcus met her luminous gaze, feeling something stir in his chest that had nothing to do with the alien atmosphere. "I was," he said quietly. "But maybe not anymore." The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows across their faces. Naya felt her heart racing a reaction she didn't fully understand. This human was dangerous. That much was clear. He'd killed a void serpent with primitive weapons and then turned it into a meal. By all rights, she should be terrified of him. Instead, she found herself wondering what it would feel like to touch the scars on his hands, to understand the stories they told. There was something profoundly attractive about his confidence, his easy mastery of this world that her people found so hostile. "I should return to my settlement," she said, though she made no move to leave. "Report what I've found. What will you tell them?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. Naya considered this, looking at the remains of the mighty void serpent, then at the human who'd brought it down. "The truth, I suppose." That the galaxy is larger and more surprising than we ever imagined. Marcus smiled, and Naya felt something flutter in her chest. Would you come back? He asked. I mean, if your duties permit. I could cook something else. Maybe something less culturally significant. Naya's lips curved in what Marcus realized was her species' version of a smile. I think I'd like that, she said softly. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about what other impossible things you consider normal. Tomorrow, then? Tomorrow. As Naya rose to leave, moving with that ethereal grace that marked her kind, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since arriving on Zephyria. Hope. Not just for rescue or survival, but for something more. Something that transcended species and worlds and the vast gulfs between stars. The last thing he saw before she disappeared into the crystal forest was her looking back at him, her luminous eyes holding promises of wonders yet to be discovered. The atmospheric readings on Marcus's scanner were going haywire, displaying patterns he'd never seen before in his 3 months on Zephyria. Purple lightning danced across the horizon, and the twin moons seemed to pulse with an ominous energy. He'd been preparing for Naya's promised return when the first warning signs appeared. The crystalline formations around his camp began resonating with a deep, harmonic tone that made his bones ache. Storm's coming, he muttered, quickly securing his equipment. On Zephyria, storms weren't just meteorological events. They were reality-warping phenomena that could tear apart molecular bonds or accelerate time in localized pockets. His shelter had been reinforced specifically for such emergencies. A flash of movement caught his eye, and Naya emerged from the crystal forest at a run, her usually graceful movements urgent with panic. Her opalescent skin was flickering rapidly between colors. Something Marcus had learned indicated high stress among her people. Marcus! She called out, her musical voice strained. The plasma storm, it's moving faster than predicted. We have minutes, not hours. He didn't hesitate, abandoning his remaining preparations to meet her halfway. My shelter, he said, grasping her luminescent hand. The contact sent an electric thrill through both of them that had nothing to do with the approaching storm. It's rated for Category 5 plasma events. They ran together across the crystalline ground, the resonating formations growing louder with each passing second. Behind them, the sky was turning an angry shade of violet, and Marcus could feel the static electricity building in the air. Naya's hair began to float around her head like she was underwater, the starlight within it pulsing in rhythm with the approaching tempest. The first plasma bolt struck just as they reached the shelter's entrance, shattering a crystal formation 20 meters away and sending rainbow fragments scattering across the ground. Marcus's hand fumbled with the emergency seal as another bolt struck closer, the superheated energy turning sand to glass. Inside, now! He shouted over the growing roar of the storm. They tumbled through the doorway, together just as the full fury of the plasma storm hit. Marcus slammed the seal shut and activated the shelter's defensive systems. Immediately, the howling outside became muted, replaced by the hum of energy shields and atmospheric processors. Shelter was larger than Naya had expected from the outside. Marcus had excavated into a natural cave formation, using the planet's own crystal structures to reinforce his defenses. The space was divided into several areas. A workshop filled with salvaged equipment, a small kitchen area where she could still smell traces of yesterday's unusual meal, and a living space that was surprisingly comfortable. We should be safe here, Marcus said, checking his instruments. The readings were extreme plasma density levels that would have been instantly fatal outside. These storms usually last 6 to 8 hours, maybe longer with this intensity. Naya wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how close the space forced them to be. Yesterday's meeting had been in the open, with the vastness of Zephyria's landscape providing a buffer. Here, she could smell Marcus's distinctive scent, something earthy and warm It was entirely alien, yet oddly appealing. "Your people," Marcus said, settling onto a makeshift couch she'd constructed from salvaged materials. "Do they know you're here?" "I told them I was conducting extended reconnaissance," Naya admitted, taking a seat across from him. Even that distance felt intimate in the confined space. "I didn't? I couldn't explain about yesterday." "About you." Marcus leaned forward, his green eyes intense in the shelter's soft lighting. "Why not?" Naya's skin shifted through several color phases as she considered her answer. "Because they wouldn't understand. The void serpents are sacred to us, Marcus. They represent the pinnacle of natural evolution on our world. What you did? What we did, sharing its flesh ... double quotes. She paused, meeting his gaze. "It would be seen as blasphemy. But you came back anyway. I couldn't stop thinking about it," she confessed, her voice barely audible over the storm's muted fury. "Not just the taste, though that was ... incredible, but you. The way you treated something that terrifies our greatest warriors as just another challenge to overcome. There's something about your fearlessness that single quotes s ... That's what?" Marcus prompted gently. "Intoxicating," she whispered, and immediately looked away, her skin flushing with what Marcus was learning were embarrassed colors. Outside, the plasma storm raged with increasing intensity. Purple lightning illuminated the shelter's small windows, and the very air seemed to crackle with energy. Marcus moved to the observation port, watching the fantastic display of raw power reshaping the landscape outside. "On Earth," he said thoughtfully, "we have storms too. Different from this, but just as dangerous in their own way. There's something about being caught in nature's fury that puts everything in perspective. Makes you realize how small you are in the grand scheme of things." Naya joined him at the window, close enough that he could feel the faint warmth radiating from her skin. "Yet you don't seem to feel small at all. You act like you could take on the universe itself," Marcus chuckled, turning to look at her. In the stormlight, her features seemed even more ethereal, her large eyes reflecting the cosmic violence outside. "Maybe that's because I'm not alone anymore." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Naya felt her heart rate accelerate, another human-like trait that surprised her. She'd always thought her species too different from others for such connections. But something about Marcus transcended biological boundaries. "Tell me about your world," she said, settling beside him on the bench he positioned near the window. "What's it like where you come from?" Marcus smiled, pleased by her curiosity. "Earth is ... chaotic, beautiful in its wildness. We have vast oceans that stretch beyond the horizon, mountains that scrape the sky, and deserts where the sun can kill you as easily as any predator. And the life, Naya, you can't imagine the diversity. Millions of species, all competing, all adapting, all finding ways to survive and thrive. It sounds dangerous. It is. That's what makes it wonderful. Every ecosystem is a battlefield, every day a test of survival. It breeds a certain ... intensity in those who embrace it." Naya found herself studying Marcus's profile as he spoke, noting the scars that crossed his jawline, the way his hands moved expressively as he described his home. "And your people? Are they all warriors like you?" "Not warriors, exactly. But survivors, yes. We've had to be. Earth doesn't coddle its children. It tests them. Those who pass the test get to shape the future." A particularly massive plasma bolt struck nearby, making the shelter's shields flare with protective energy. The impact knocked Naya forward, and Marcus instinctively caught her, his strong arms pulling her against his chest. For a moment, they stayed like that, her opalescent skin warm against his weathered hands. "I've never felt anything like this," Naya whispered, her face tilted up toward his. "This ... connection. My people form bonds based on harmony, on shared frequencies of thought and feeling. But this is different. It's like fire. Fire can be dangerous, Marcus murmured, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. Her skin was incredibly soft, with a texture unlike anything he'd ever encountered. It can burn everything it touches. Maybe I want to burn, Naya breathed, her luminous eyes locked on his. The storm outside seemed to pause, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Marcus felt the weight of the moment, the significance of crossing this line between species, between worlds. But looking into Naya's eyes, seeing the trust and desire reflected there, he realized some boundaries were meant to be crossed. When their lips met, it was like touching starlight. Naya's kiss was soft at first, tentative, but as Marcus responded, it deepened into something more passionate, more primal. Her skin began to glow with a soft, pulsing light that matched the rhythm of their heartbeats, and Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside him. They broke apart, both breathing hard, foreheads touching as the reality of what had just happened settled between them. "This is impossible," Naya whispered, but she made no move to pull away from his embrace. "I seem to specialize in impossible things," Marcus replied, his voice rough with emotion. The storm raged on around them, but inside the shelter they discovered a different kind of tempest. They talked through the night, sharing stories of their worlds, their dreams, their fears. Marcus told her about the loneliness of being a perpetual outsider, always pushing boundaries that others feared to cross. Naya spoke of the weight of expectations in her society, the pressure to conform to ancient traditions that sometimes felt stifling. "I've never met anyone like you," she said as they lay together on his makeshift couch, her head on his shoulder as dawn's light began to filter through the storm clouds. "You make me want to be braver, to question things I've always accepted without thought." "And you," Marcus said, pressing a gentle kiss to her starlight hair, "make me feel like maybe I've found something worth staying still for." The plasma storm was finally beginning to weaken, the violent purple lightning giving way to gentler displays of aurora-like phenomena. But neither of them was eager for it to end. In the shelter's protective embrace, they'd found something neither had expected, a connection that transcended the vast differences between their species. "What happens now?" Naya asked as the storm's fury continued to subside. Marcus tightened his arms around her, breathing in her unique scent something like ozone and flowers and starlight made manifest. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know I want to find out." Outside, Zephyria's twin moons were setting, their light painting the storm-washed landscape in shades of silver and gold. The crystalline formations had stopped their harmonic resonance, and the first calls of native wildlife could be heard as the world began to wake from the storm's passage. But inside the shelter, Marcus and Naya remained in their cocoon of warmth and newfound intimacy, neither willing to break the spell that had been woven during the long storm-tossed night. They had crossed more than just a physical threshold. They had discovered that love could bloom even between stars. That connection could bridge any gap the universe might place between two hearts. As the first rays of Zephyria's sun crept through the observation board, Naya traced lazy patterns on Marcus's chest with her luminescent fingers. "My people have a saying," she murmured sleepily. "The greatest storms reveal the strongest foundations." Marcus smiled, catching her hand and bringing it to his lips. "Then let the storms come," he whispered against her palm. "We'll weather them together." The morning after the storm brought an unsettling quiet to Zephyria's crystalline landscape. Marcus stood at the edge of his camp, scanning the horizon with practiced eyes, while Naya gathered samples of the storm-altered vegetation nearby. The plasma tempest had left its mark everywhere crystal formations now hummed with residual energy, and several new mineral structures had emerged from the planet's depths. "The readings are strange," Naya said, her portable scanner emitting soft chimes as she worked. Her skin still held a subtle glow from their night together, something Marcus found both beautiful and oddly comforting. The storm's energy signature is lingering far longer than it should. Marcus nodded absently, his attention caught by something else entirely. The local wildlife had been conspicuously absent since dawn. No calls from the crystal birds, no rustling from the small scavengers that usually emerged after storms to feed on the debris. Even more concerning, his perimeter sensors were detecting movement patterns that seemed too organized, too purposeful to be random. "Naya," he said quietly, not wanting to alarm her, but needing her expertise. "Your people's records on void serpent behavior, do they ever mention pack hunting?" She looked up from her samples, her luminous eyes narrowing with concern. "Pack hunting? No, they're typically solitary creatures." "Why do you ... double quotes?" She trailed off as she noticed his tense posture, the way his hand had unconsciously moved toward his weapon. "What is it?" Before Marcus could answer, a low, resonant hum filled the air, not the harmonic tones of the crystals, but something organic and deeply menacing. The sound seemed to come from multiple directions at once, creating an unsettling harmony that made the hair on Marcus's arms stand up. "That's not possible," Naya whispered, her skin flickering through rapid color changes that indicated extreme alarm. "The death cry you heard yesterday, it should have scattered any other void serpents for kilometers. They avoid areas where their kind have died." Marcus's combat instincts were screaming now, every sense heightened to maximum alertness. "Unless they're not avoiding it," he said grimly. "Unless they're investigating it." The attack came without further warning. 3 massive forms erupted from concealment among the crystal formation's void serpents, each one slightly smaller than the alpha Marcus had killed, but moving with coordinated precision that spoke of pack intelligence. Their obsidian scales gleamed with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in synchronized rhythm, and their psychic emanations created a disorienting wave of fear and confusion. "The shelter!" Marcus shouted, already moving toward Naya while drawing his plasma rifle. But even as he ran, he could see they wouldn't make it in time. The serpents had positioned themselves perfectly, cutting off their escape routes with tactical awareness that chilled him to the bone. The largest of the 3 reared up, its massive head weaving hypnotically as it prepared to strike. Marcus's first plasma bolt caught its center mass, the superheated energy searing through scale and flesh, but the creature barely flinched. Instead, it let out a shriek that seemed to pierce directly into his mind, momentarily stunning him with psychic feedback. Naya moved with fluid grace, her own weapon a crystalline device that channeled harmonic frequencies singing as it discharged. The beam struck the second serpent at the base of its skull, disrupting its neural pathways and sending it into spasms of confusion. But the third creature was already in motion, its massive coils writhing as it launched itself at Marcus with frightening speed. Marcus rolled aside at the last second, the serpent's fangs gouging deep furrows in the crystalline ground where he'd been standing. He came up firing, his shots precise and devastating, but the creature's hide was thick with evolutionary armor. It would take more than plasma fire to bring these beasts down. "Together," Naya called out, her harmonics keeping the disoriented serpent at bay while she maneuvered toward Marcus. "Their pack coordination if we disrupt their communication frequency." She didn't get to finish the sentence. The alpha serpent, wounded but far from defeated, whipped its tail in a wide arc that caught both of them. Marcus managed to absorb most of the impact with his reinforced armor, but the force still sent them both tumbling across the rough ground dot as they struggled to regain their footing. A new sound cut through the chaos, the distinctive whine of advanced luminar aircraft. A sleek vessel descended from the storm-darkened sky, its hull gleaming with the same opalescent sheen as Naya's skin. Energy weapons blazed from its underside, striking the serpents with precisely calibrated frequencies that sent them reeling. The craft touched down with whisper-quiet grace, and a figure emerged that made Marcus's blood run cold despite the ongoing battle. The newcomer was clearly Luminar, tall and imposing with the same ethereal beauty as Naya, but bearing himself with unmistakable military bearing. His armor was more elaborate than Naya's, marked with insignia that spoke of high rank and noble birth. Jorik, Naya breathed, her skin cycling through colors Marcus had never seen before, a complex pattern that seemed to indicate shock, relief, and something uncomfortably close to guilt. Jorik Nightbane moved with deadly efficiency, his weapons cutting through the serpent's defenses with surgical precision. But Marcus noticed the way the Luminar warrior's eyes kept flicking toward them, particularly toward Naya, and the expression he saw that was far from friendly. The battle ended quickly with Jorik's intervention. The three void serpents, faced with coordinated fire from advanced Luminar weaponry, retreated into the crystal formations to lick their wounds and reassess their strategy. But Marcus had no illusions that they were gone for good. If anything, their tactical retreat suggested an intelligence that made them far more dangerous than any mere predator. Naya, Jorik said as he approached them, his voice carrying harmonics that Marcus's translator rendered as coldly formal. When you failed to return from your reconnaissance mission, I was dispatched to locate you. I find you here, in the company of ... his luminous gaze fixed on Marcus with undisguised hostility. This creature. Jorik, please. Naya stepped between them, her hands raised in a placating gesture. This is Marcus Thorn. I know what he is, Jorik interrupted, his skin flickering with aggressive patterns. A human who desecrated the sacred apex predator. The primitive who has somehow managed to corrupt you into participating in his blasphemy. Marcus felt his own temper rising, but he forced himself to remain calm. This was clearly more than just a rescue mission. There were undercurrents here that spoke of personal history between Naya and this warrior. If by corrupt you mean save her life, Marcus said evenly, then guilty as charged. Those serpents would have killed her if we hadn't worked together. Jorik's laugh was harsh and discordant. Worked together? You contaminated her with your primitive violence, turned her from the path of harmony that has sustained our people for millennia. He turned to Naya, his expression softening slightly. Come, beloved. Let us leave this place of death and defilement. The elders are waiting. The word beloved hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked at Naya, seeing the conflict written across her features in shifting patterns of color and light. Jorik, she said quietly, I can't. Not yet. There's more here than you understand. More? Jorik's skin blazed with angry bioluminescence. What more could there be? You were promised to me, Naya. Our bonding ceremony was to take place upon your return from this mission. Instead, I find you ... His eyes flicked between them, taking in their proximity, the way they unconsciously leaned toward each other, even in the midst of crisis. What has he done to you? He hasn't done anything to me, Naya said, her own colors flaring with defiance. He's shown me that there are other ways to live, other ways to see the universe, ways that don't require blind adherence to traditions that may no longer serve us. The tension between the three of them was palpable, crackling in the air like residual storm energy. Marcus found himself in the surreal position of facing down an alien warrior over a woman he'd known for less than 2 days, but who had somehow become essential to his very existence. This ends now, Jorik said, his hand moving to the ceremonial blade at his side. Human, you will release whatever hold you have over her, or I will cut it from you. There's no hold, Marcus replied, his own weapons ready but not yet drawn. What's between us is her choice to make. Choice? Jorik spat. You speak of choice while poisoning her mind with your savage ways. She consumed the flesh of a sacred being. She has violated every principle of harmony our people hold dear. And she's never been more alive, Marcus said, seeing Naya's skin pulse with colors that he was learning to associate with deep emotion. Look at her, really look. When has she ever been more truly herself? For a moment, all three of them stood frozen in tableau two, males of different species, facing off over a female whose choice would determine not just their fates, but potentially the future of both their peoples. The void serpents watched from their hiding places among the crystals, their intelligence cataloging this new development in their ancient world story. Then Naya stepped forward, her decision clear in every line of her luminous form. "Jorik," she said, her voice carrying harmonics of regret, but also unshakable resolve. "I'm sorry. The bonding ceremony. I cannot hour it. My heart has chosen a different path." The Luminar warrior's skin went completely white a color. Marcus instinctively understood as absolute shock and devastation. For a long moment, Jorik simply stood there, processing the magnitude of what she'd said. "You would throw away everything," he whispered, "for this alien? This primitive who knows nothing of our ways, our culture, our very essence." "I would choose love over duty," Naya replied simply. "I would choose growth over stagnation. I would choose the fire that burns bright over the cold light that merely endures." Jorik's hand tightened on his blade, and Marcus tensed, ready for the fight that seemed inevitable. But instead of attacking, the Luminar warrior simply nodded slowly. "Then you have chosen," he said, his voice hollow with loss. "And I will honor that choice, even as it destroys everything I'd hoped for our future." He looked at Marcus, his eyes holding promises of future conflict. "But know this, human the elders will not be as understanding. What you have begun here will have consequences far beyond your primitive imagination." With that, he turned and walked back toward his craft, his movements stiff with barely controlled emotion. The vessel lifted off with the same whisper-quiet grace, disappearing into Zephia's turbulent sky and leaving Marcus and Naya alone with the weight of what had just transpired. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Naya said softly, her skin slowly cycling back to more peaceful colors. "Jorik and I were betrothed from childhood. It was considered an ideal match, two noble houses united for the strengthening of our bloodlines." Marcus took her hands in his, feeling the subtle warmth that made her so uniquely beautiful. "Do you regret it? Choosing this path?" Naya smiled, and for the first time since Jorik's arrival, her bioluminescence returned to the warm, golden tones Marcus had come to associate with happiness. "How can I regret finding something I never knew existed? You've shown me that love isn't something to be arranged or assigned. It's something that ignites between souls, regardless of species or expectations." As if summoned by her words, the void serpents emerged from hiding once more, their intelligence having processed the dramatic scene they'd witnessed. But this time, their approach seemed different, less aggressive, more curious. They arranged themselves at the perimeter of the camp, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in what almost seemed like communication. "They're learning," Marcus realized, his scientific mind racing even as he held Naya close. "Watching us, studying our interactions. They're evolving beyond mere predators into something ... more." Implications of this development would have staggered him just days ago. Now, with Naya in his arms, and a promise of an uncertain but exciting future stretching before them, it simply seemed like one more impossible thing in a universe suddenly full of miraculous possibilities. The storm had passed, the battle was won, and love had triumphed over duty. But as Jorik's warnings echoed in the crystalline air, both Marcus and Naya knew their greatest challenges still lay ahead.